Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
Good evening.
How are we all doing?
Excellent.
Yeah,
All right, I think.
Good.
We're missing Obi again.
we are.
Chairs there, isn't
We've
it?
got an empty chair. We
Yeah.
should do this on video, then you could see the empty chair that we're all looking at right now.
That can I just say all of us looked at as soon as we spoke about him. Like, where are you, man?
He's on holiday, I think, isn't
He is. He's having a lovely, much-deserved holiday break. We hope you're having an amazing time, Obi.
Well,
know
you
it's-
say much deserved, but he's missed another week of podcast. I mean,
Outrageous
come on.
behaviour.
Oh, shocking.
No,
How can we make him pay for it? Make him do a podcast all by himself
Yeah.
next time he's
Oh,
back.
no, that would be cruel.
We're only joking, Oves. We're only joking. We do hope you're having a really lovely
Yeah, we
time,
do.
and we're looking
do.
forward to seeing you and hearing all about it when you get home. So we've been going through an interesting time. Like most churches, things change a little bit when they get into August. The programme changes a little bit. Series normally change. Even the sort of pattern of the church service changes a little bit, doesn't it?
Often does, yeah.
I'm assuming that's because there's a lot of people that go away on holidays. So
Yep.
like our children's work has closed down for August to give all the volunteers a rest, which I think is really lovely. I say lovely, but have we not noticed the noise at the back of church
It's
for
great,
the
isn't it?
last 2 Sundays?
I've been oblivious to it.
Have you?
People have talked about it, but I haven't noticed.
I think
Sharon was
it's
like, I love
lovely.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, Sharon was like, to hear them laugh and giggle
It's
is really
great.
lovely. Do you know what? I loved it until this week when I heard both my boys clearly having some kind of argument and fight. So I was up and quickly at the back giving them the stare to say, enough.
I was thinking about how we could get them involved, but I haven't got an answer to that yet.
Ooh.
Wondering if we could get them nearer the front doing something, but I haven't quite solved what we could do. So I need to have a chat to Rosemary
Yeah.
tomorrow and see if there's an idea we can come up with.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
Co-hosting the service or something, I don't know, but like anything.
Well, they helped give out the...
They gave out
Brilliant
communion,
wine,
which was
yeah.
lovely.
That was really cool.
Yeah.
Absolutely lovely 2 weeks ago, wasn't it?
Yeah. It's really nice because this is their home and their
Yeah,
house.
absolutely.
Mhm.
You know, and they
Yeah.
they clearly feel like it's home for them to be in the house, to be in the sanctuary with all of us. You know, they are so at rest.
Yeah.
You know, they kind of, if we give you a little bit of a picture, if you're not part of our church, you have the area at the back and they have kind of made that their house.
They really have.
I mean, they own it.
Good luck getting to the kitchen.
It's kind of like if anyone else is a grown up in that corner, it's like, sorry, this is our place. Off you go. They've taken over that and it's lovely.
Yeah,
It's lovely for the guys that normally serve week in after week. It's really nice that they get to have a break.
Yeah.
And it's really lovely having the kids.
And you might wonder what's going on amongst them. Well, not this week, but the week before, we had communion, and we gave an opportunity for people to pray together, and as well during the service. I don't think that was at communion time, but separately perhaps. And gave this opportunity for people to pray, and I noticed this great block of kids at the back, and thought, oh, I wonder what's going on over there, because it'd be wonderful if someone went to pray with them and help them. So I made sure that other people were praying and made my way to the back to find that one of the older, I was going to say children, was actually in the youth, had already started getting a little group together and praying with them.
Nice.
So they were already doing it. So when I got there, I was almost interrupting, but then
Love
just
it.
cheered them on with what they were doing and carried on. And then all of the kids, each one of them prayed as part of just that time of
That's
sharing
beautiful.
together. It's just so encouraging
Mm.
to think, you know, we've said something at the front and they were listening enough, or one of them was, to mobilise them to respond, which is really good.
That's amazing.
So God's at work even in the play and all the rest of it. God, they're still listening out.
Which is really lovely. Really
Yeah, it's good.
encouraging for me as the mum. I was leading worship that morning, so I had
Yeah.
no clue what was going in there.
Yeah.
I did see actually you go over, which
Yeah,
I
I
thought was
noticed too.
awesome. But that's really wonderful to know that one of the youth took it on themselves to say, come on guys, let's pray.
Yeah. It's what
Whoever
you,
you
want,
were, youth, if you're listening, yes, I love that.
isn't it? Yeah, come on.
You have to be careful with kids because they always are listening, aren't they? When you
Usually when you don't want them to.
Yeah.
I'm definitely learning that with Ezra. My goodness. I was like, oh, how's he got to that stage? Thinking he's a boy and he's not going to want to
Yeah.
listen to anything. On my days, he takes in everything.
Mhm.
So that's
Yeah.
a very interesting stage.
And you chat to parents where there's multiple languages used at home, and that's quite fun as well, because sometimes the parents try and talk in their own language, but the kids are so sharp, they still work out what's going on.
Yeah.
So
Oh, man.
really, really fun. But you were going to say about what we've been doing on
So
these Sundays.
Yeah, so things have changed a little bit because of August, and you came up, you and I'm assuming the leadership team have come up with Testimony Sundays, which has just been phenomenal.
Well, it kind of started because we had 2 people say to me, "Can we share our testimony?" It was a couple.
Yeah.
And they actually shared on the first week, and they said, "Can we share our testimony?" And it's we'd love to. And this was a month or so ago, and this has just been kind of nagging away at me. And I was thinking about the summer time, thinking, what can we do? And I then wondered if we might get more people to share, and thought as well. We've been in this. I think we spoke about it last week. Last time we had a podcast was around this sense of community and how we create community.
Yeah.
Was really just aware that it's actually quite hard to get to know people.
Yeah.
To really get to know a little bit of their story, to know what's going on in their lives. And when I thought about this one couple who wanted to share a bit of their story, it just snowballed from there. So
Amazing.
we ended up with a few weeks booked, 4 weeks, I think, of people sharing stories, their own story, of what God's done in their lives and specific aspects of that. And so we're 2 weeks in, which is great.
And it's been 2 absolute stonking weeks. It's been amazing.
It's
Great,
been
yeah.
lovely, hasn't it?
I've just done the maths. I'm not going to be here for the 4th week.
No,
That's
you're
terrible. Yeah.
I know, I was just thinking that.
Yeah.
Oh no, who's missing? We'll just have to listen to it.
Yeah.
That's
You
the
will.
joy.
Yeah, we'll
Do you know what? There are some things that, were just a pain in the bottom with COVID. But this has been a real blessing because we get to watch
You
the
get to catch
service.
up,
You
don't you?
don't ever
Yep.
get to miss out. So,
Yeah.
we're going to be at Wildfires, which is very exciting. So we're going to be having an amazing time in a field worshipping Jesus with thousands of people. But the joy is that we'll get
Well,
to go
some of
back.
us are here worshipping Jesus here.
Yeah,
so it's great.
absolutely. And
Be
we
good.
just won't miss it. So we'll get to hear
And
the
it is
testimonies.
inspiring to hear. I had somebody who isn't here very often was here on Sunday and commented about how, because they're not even in the UK, but they said we watch every Sunday. And they're joining in the service
Nice.
from their location week by week by week.
Yeah,
And that
it's
was so
amazing.
encouraging to hear.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
So you think, it's worth doing.
Yeah.
And it's obviously working enough for them that they're connecting in and still feeling like they belong, which is lovely. So-
Definitely. Can I just say, first off, thank you to all the people that have done the testimony so far, because I think it's incredibly brave.
Mm.
Yeah.
It's a nerve-wracking thing to tell
Mhm.
your story. It really is. I don't think it's easy for anybody. And the honesty and the openness and the vulnerability that people have shared with us in the last 2 weeks has been such an incredible gift on so many levels. So I personally want to thank you for sharing a bit of yourselves with us. And I want to thank you, those of you that are going to do it in the coming weeks. Thank you that you're putting yourself out there for us, because it is so rich. And we were just talking before we started to record of that actually what's really beautiful is the conversations you see happening after.
Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
Really glorious.
Just seeing people go, and that happened on Sunday. I mean, it's happening all over the place, I'm sure, but one person who was behind me said, I need to go and speak to so-and-so because of what they just said. I said, go on then, go for it. And they immediately went over and started a conversation. And that conversation carried on for ages. And you could see it was a really rich conversation as people were connecting for the first time, I think. And that's lovely. And that's one of the reasons that we're doing this is to build bridges across from one person to another, one family to another, and to make those connections.
It makes it like there's so many lovely people that you want to go, I want to have time with all of you. You know, when you want to go, man, I need to have you guys round. Man, I want to get to know you a bit more. I think that's the really beautiful thing, that you want to sit there and you go, I had no idea that this has been your journey. I want to hear more. I want to know more of who you are. And the other thing that I think is really beautiful is that it's not always easy to start a conversation with people that you don't know.
Yeah.
And what this is doing is opening up a way of being able to communicate with people that you wouldn't normally, because you might be a bit nervous.
I hope it's doing that.
Yeah.
I hope that's the response, rather than people going, I know all about them now. I don't need to
No.
talk to them. So I hope it's actually that it is sparking those conversations.
Yeah,
I'm
I
sure
hope
it is.
I hope so.
Yeah,
And
breaks the ice, doesn't it?
It
Yeah.
does.
Yeah,
It
allows
gives
people in.
it gives you a way in
Yeah.
in that conversation. And also what I really love is that the realness of people's journeys can take away any kind of prejudgment that you can have.
Yeah.
Takes it all away.
It's a lovely leveler, isn't
Yeah.
it, in some ways, because even if people are talking about situations that you've never been in and experiences that you can't measure up to in some ways, like on Sunday, I had 4 different people sharing, kind of 3, one couple and then two individuals sharing, and I've not. I can't repeat the stories that they shared. I haven't lived those stories. And yet each of us identify with something in those stories. And every one of them, they were talking about God's provision, God's blessing, God's goodness, but also just how tough things have been.
Yeah.
And there was that thread running through that I hope was incredibly encouraging for people, all of us who are listening, and those who go back to listen again, because you just see God's with us in the darkest of times, in the most difficult times. He's there, and he's faithful, and he's for us, and he's with us. And to have people standing on a small stage and saying, this is a bit of my story, and actually discover that it's Jesus' story, really, is so cool.
Yeah.
It's really good.
And I think encourages you to hold on no matter what.
Yeah.
When you are hearing what some of these people have gone through, it gives you a place of going, none of them said it was easy. None of them made light of things. None of them have stood up. No one so far has stood up and said, hey, being a Christian has made my life so easy and everything's wonderful. Every single one of them have said life has been so challenging, but Jesus.
Yeah.
And it encourages you, it spurs you on, and it makes me in awe of who our God is. And it's just been so, so, so rich. I've loved it. So because we've been in this, I thought it would be really lovely to talk about testimony and talk about the importance of it. So, James, when we talk about testimony, what comes to mind and what do you think about it?
Well, I was just thinking biblically, in the Bible, the whole of the Old Testament is a testimony, isn't it? That you just opened it from Genesis. I don't know what the last book of the Old Testament is. from the start of the Old Testament, then is just the story.
You've got 2 choices. It's either Malachi or it's 2 Chronicles. Or it's Chronicles, depending on which version you're using.
I was going to say
so the Hebrew scriptures are arranged up to Chronicles.
Oh, now you're getting
in order.
Way over.
Ours are arranged up to Malachi.
You're way over my pay scale. I didn't know that at all. Goodness me. I love testimonies. They're just rich. I was just thinking as we were talking about it that they're very different from preaching, aren't they? Obviously. And what you were saying there, that people shared the difficulty of their lives, but God was in it. And I don't think that comes across so much when you listen to a preach. A preach is about information, you're studying the Bible, a certain principle, but there's something really rich about the difficulty that people have gone through. Yeah. There's an element there that you don't normally get. And I love that. And I think all of us can relate to difficulties, can't we? No one has a perfect life. I've never met one like that yet. And there's nothing like sharing Christ in those difficult times with other people, because everyone can relate to that.
I think it's interesting, isn't it? Because I would say a lot of the New Testament is, when we look at the Gospels, they are all testimony, because it was these guys were telling us what they'd been through, who Jesus was to them and what they saw. And then when you hear about all of what went on with Paul, and Paul kind of giving testimony of the journey that he'd been on and what God had been doing with him, they're all giving this testimony of their life and their walk with Jesus. But there's something really powerful in today when you have somebody that stood in front of you that's in flesh and bone, living through and sharing, whether they're sharing with great tears and brokenness or they're sharing with great triumph. There's something really powerful that, if you know your Bible, You know those things,
Mm.
but to have someone stood in front
Yeah.
of you talking about those things in today,
Really
it's
powerful.
incredibly powerful. Backing
Yeah.
up everything
Yeah.
that God says, but it's in
Yeah.
the now that
Yeah.
just has such weight.
I love the way James took us to the Old Testament being a testimony.
Hmm.
And of course, I'm a bit slow on the uptake, but the clue's in the name. So we've got an Old Testament and a New Testament. They are testimonies.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh yeah, of course they are. That's the whole point. That's
Yeah,
why they're
yeah,
called
yeah.
that, because they are testimonies of God's work. And
Yeah.
there's that sense that the book of you sometimes hear people talking about the book of Acts and making the point that it's as if it doesn't come to an end because we're still living in the continuation of that, where the church's story is added on to the stories of all those who've gone before, and we're living in this continued story of people who we trust are pointing to Jesus
Yeah.
still and sharing his story.
Mm.
So I'm sitting here looking up a passage that came up in a search. It's Psalm 66. Come and hear, all you who fear God. Let me tell you what he's done for me.
Mm.
And I just love that bit.
Mm.
Come and hear, all you who fear God. There's such wisdom
Mm.
and depth in there, isn't there, about fearing God? And let
Yeah.
me tell you what he's done for me.
Yeah.
I actually looked up the whole passage to see what it was like in context, but I won't go on about that. It's one of those random passages where that's that one verse works really well, but the
So you're just
before
gonna- let's just miss out.
yeah, miss out the weird stuff before and after.
That's like when you're reading a psalm. When you sometimes when you start a service, you want to start with a bit of a psalm to lift people up and encourage them. And some of them, as you're reading, you get towards the end and think, "Oh, I wish I'd read all of this before."
Exactly.
And then you're hastily skipping over verses.
I know, and you feel like it's really wrong.
Yeah,
But
to
the
miss
idea
anything
is
out.
when all of a sudden it's about killing the enemy and
Bashing
doing
their heads against the rocks.
Yes.
It's like, oh, I can't read that out in church.
You're
But
like,
you could have
morning,
done, of course.
Sunday.
Yeah. Morning, everyone.
I think that I'd love to just touch on the word fear, because I feel like we can sometimes misinterpret
Mhm.
and see that we shouldn't fear, where actually it's a holy reverence of that God is
Yeah.
majestic, God is authority,
Mhm.
and it's a holy and a beautiful reverence to God. Let's not
Yep.
see the word fear and see it in the wrong context, because I know that there's somebody that I know that says, I will not have my children fear and I will not fear God. And I want to go, okay, let's just
Yeah.
check what
Which kind of
what you're
works well
saying.
until you actually stand in front of him.
yeah. And it says
And
every knee will
I'd-
bow.
Yeah, and I think we might not like to use the word fear, but there's a level of awesome wonder
Yeah.
in the presence of God. And even if that's just the magnificence of God's love or God's goodness or holiness or majesty or whatever it might be, whatever aspect of his character you want to see, I think he's so far beyond us
Mm-hmm.
that, I understand why people may not want to use the word fear.
Yeah.
And that may have such negative connotations
Mhm.
for them. But it's a bit of a struggle to come up with a better word.
Yes.
Because there's
That's a good
something
point.
about that
Yeah.
bigness and majesty that's it's going to be a wow moment, you know,
Yeah.
when you come face to face. And we see this again and again, don't we, where John in Revelation is on his
Yeah.
face
Yes.
before the Lord, and Moses is on his face. You know, people are just on their face before the Lord because they're just confronted with the awesomeness of God.
And
So,
even with angels,
yeah,
you know, that's not
Yeah.
even being in the presence of God himself, but angels
Yeah.
and everyone's, and it's like, fear not.
yeah. First thing the angel says to you,
Yeah.
don't be afraid.
Yeah.
Okay, so there must be a reason why.
Exactly.
There's something of this otherness,
Yeah.
of the holiness of the being that's there in front of them. Yeah.
And so, because I think, and I will use the word think, I understand what the word fear means in that passage. I've read it with joy.
Yeah. You were
Yes.
smiling, yeah.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
good.
Because
Yeah.
And you
really,
described it as a wisdom.
Yeah.
yeah, because when you know God, you fear God at the same
Yeah.
time. The more you know God, the more you fear God. But it's not the truth. It's not the traditional sense of the word fear.
Yeah. It's not a
it's
phobia.
It's an awe.
It's not a phobia that drives you from the thing. And I think that's the issue we often talk about. Fear drives us away.
Yeah.
We run away, whereas the fear of the Lord should draw you
It
near
does.
to God.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
The fear that doesn't scare you, that you
Yes.
shouldn't be
Yeah,
scared
yeah.
of,
Yes.
but the fear of. I mean, if
I'm trying to
he
think of an
showed up-
analogy.
if he showed up now,
Yeah.
I can only imagine that I would be flat out.
The
broken
podcast would go
for
very
him.
quiet. We'd all be on our faces, wouldn't we?
Yeah,
It-
we
No
would.
one would be
The
speaking.
illustration that's sometimes used is from a children's story that's a universal story, The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which C.S. Lewis wrote. And there's the character of the lion in there called Aslan. And he's majestic.
Yeah.
And yet the kids love being with Aslan. He's, kind of warm and friendly and kind and generous, but yet you never quite get the full measure of him because he's a bit awesome.
Yeah.
And he's the Christ figure in
Yeah.
that story. And I think that's the kind of closest we often get. And I'll butcher the line probably, but is it Lucy? One of the girls in there asks if he's safe. And the response, safe, is the response. It's like, that's the wrong kind of term to use just because of who he is.
And because I think he's not, if I remember correctly, he does roar.
Yeah.
And that is
And he's got authority.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's that holy, reverent
Mhm.
fear of when the lion roars,
Yeah.
we are going to be in awe.
Yeah.
Ooh, I'm getting goosebumps.
And it's
I
not just the
know.
aircon. Yeah. Come
Yeah.
on. It's exciting. And what was the second half of that verse was about? Come and hear what he's done, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Or come and let me tell you.
Reopen my phone again.
Yeah, do. Because that was good.
Come and hear, all you who fear God, and I will tell you what he has done
Yeah.
for my soul.
Oh,
Interesting.
it's good.
Which, can you just say what psalm that is, just so that anyone that wants to find out where that is, what is it?
This means they'll be able to read it in context
course,
and read
of
the
course they
before and
will.
after.
Doesn't matter.
We trust
That's a
our
good
listeners.
thing,
There's Psalm 66, specifically verse 16.
Okay, wonderful.
though. But read round it. Please read round it.
Come and
'cause
see what
it's
he's done
always
for. I will tell you what he's done for my soul.
Well, obviously the search has come up
It's great.
with a different version, and then when I actually looked it up, it was
It's good.
come and tell what he's done for me.
Which is the same thing. Soul, we so misinterpret that, but in the Bible, particularly the Hebrew scriptures, the word soul means all of me.
Yeah.
It's the whole of me. It's a completeness. It's not a little spiritual bit in the middle of me. It's not my emotions. It's not all the things that came in with Platonic Greek thought hundreds of years later. It's the word soul is me. So which is why you've got two versions. One says my soul and one says me, because they're actually meaning the same thing.
I love that. I'm glad you've just cleared that up. That was
It's
great.
it's often
Yeah, it was good.
misinterpreted, which
Yeah.
isn't always very helpful.
Everybody else was listening except me. Cause
Doesn't matter.
doesn't matter.
Because I want to dig
no.
into what it does for us when we hear someone telling us
Yeah.
what the Lord's done for them. That's the bit I want to dig into.
Yes.
So what does it do for you, Joida, when you hear someone tell you what the Lord's done for them?
Oh, I mean, I think it depends what I hear.
Okay.
Because sometimes it can make me want to shout at the back, yes.
Okay.
Other times it can leave me just broken.
Mhm.
But not broken in a sad way, just broken in a, God is so good.
In the depth of what they're sharing, you mean?
Yeah,
Okay.
just, the couple that were talking this Sunday just gone, and
Mm.
please forgive us, we're not going to mention any names because it's not our story to tell.
Yeah.
So, but the couple that were sharing this weekend just gone just wrecked me,
Mhm.
wrecked my heart, because
Mm.
you can tell the journey they've been
Yeah.
through has
Mm.
taken them to the edge
Yeah.
and some.
Yeah.
And yet they were talking about the faithfulness of just holding on in there when
Yeah.
they didn't have a clue what was going on. They didn't understand.
Yeah.
They would have loved to have had something come in and fix and
Mm.
healing and all of these things that we
Mhm.
totally believe that God can do. And he wasn't doing it in the way that we think it should be done.
Yeah.
But they were talking of testimony of how God held them in
Mm.
and through, even though it was hard.
Yeah.
really hard.
Yeah.
And to hear that with both children, they had journeys that were really hard at times. It just broke me inside of going, that they have stood firm with my God, with my Jesus. They've stood firm. It was just humbling.
Yeah.
So humbling. So I think it really depends for me what I hear,
Yeah.
Yes.
because there are some times that you're just filled with joy for these people and so celebrating with them, and there's others that you're crying with them because you just go, your journey, nobody would want your journey, but the way you've done it is just humbling and encouraging and challenging at the same time, because there was some stuff that they said that made me really want to go, Lord, would I be that faithful? Lord, would I trust you that much? And brought those challenges back to me in that humble place of going, Lord, please would I be that faithful to you? Please would I trust you when it looks very dark and very hard and there doesn't seem to be an end to it. So yeah, for me, I love testimony. I love them because they are meant to encourage and equip us. And even if it's not anything you've been through, I can tell you now, you will remember it when you are going through something. There will be almost like a deposit that's been put into your subconscious that will come back, because that is the joy of the Holy Spirit. Then all of a sudden things start to come back. And then all of a sudden you know someone that has walked through it that you might be able to go and speak to. So yeah, I love them, which is why I'm thoroughly enjoying this August that we've got going on. So yeah. It all depends what someone shares to what reaction you're going to get from me.
No, that's fair. How about you, James? What does it do for you when someone tells you what the Lord has done for them?
I think Joeda's mostly covered it, because a different story will affect you in a different way.
Yeah.
And I think you can mostly relate to most stories. It's enriching, isn't it? It just really encourages you, really builds your faith massively in a way that you don't get from anything else. Actually, I think you can read the Word and really love the Word, but that's a certain way to be encouraged. But other people's personal testimony, there's something very unique about that. And we should need to do it more often. Love it.
I wonder if that's, you're talking about reading the Word and the difference. I wonder if that's because we've not got the biblical authors in front of us. So if you got Luke, who's compiled the stories, or John, who's been there with Jesus, and you're listening to John telling his story, or reading, and you know John, like at the beginning of 1 John, I think he says that which we've touched, tasted, seen, we're reporting to you. It's like, this is eyewitness testimony. And I think if you knew John, your eyes would be open, your heart would be pounding as you listen to his stories.
Definitely.
I have a verse to share.
Oh,
Hebrews 10. Consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day draw near. So it's basically saying, meet together, do the face-to-face thing. Share, meet, do it together.
I think it inspires. For me, it inspires faith. And as I think you said, Joeda, when it's like when you're going through a situation that's got any connection with what's been shared, you remember either a situation you've gone through or one that a friend has gone through, or someone who's you've heard their story. And you might not be them, but it can inspire you to take steps of trusting God in that moment if you've heard that story. So I think I love that as well. The other thing it's been doing for me, it's been giving me an even greater respect for the person who's sharing. As they begin to tell a little bit of their story, if you just put yourself in their shoes for a moment, or even I'm marveling at what God's done and the courage people have to trust Him. In everyday situations, to do things I've never done. It's amazing, isn't it? It's humbling.
It is. Yeah, it is really humbling. And I think, do you know what? Just getting to know people through that rawness and honesty is just, I don't know, it's just beautiful. This is what we're supposed to. I think when you look at biblical times and you think about the house church and the smaller thing that there would have been, they were in each other's lives a lot
This
more.
is what they were doing, isn't
They
it?
were doing it.
This became the Bible.
Yeah.
People sharing stories,
Yeah.
either of what they'd seen Jesus do
Yeah.
or of what he'd done in their lives, and that's what got written down. It's
Yeah.
what Luke compiled to make his gospel, was the accounts of those who'd met Jesus.
Yeah. And we're supposed to tell others about
Yeah.
what God has done. We are supposed
Mm.
to say it. And I think all of a sudden when you're hearing our church family members sharing a little part of their journey, it makes you go, do you know what? It's so powerful. Why are we not sharing this
Yeah.
more often?
What-
Why are we not in our friendships or in our groups not saying, hey?
One of the things I find challenging, I was going to say frustrating. I do find it frustrating, but I'm not frustrated with the individual. It's when we don't share because the story hasn't finished yet. And so often
That's so good.
I'll say to someone who's got a bit of a story, so I'd love to hear you share that, and they will say back, I'm not ready yet. And I understand that, because it might be too raw, too real, too. But sometimes what's actually being said is, it's not done yet. I need to wait till it's finished to then give the testimony of all that happened. And I love to hear, I much prefer to hear the testimonies in process.
Yeah.
It's more raw then, isn't it?
And it's more identifiable.
Yeah.
Because if the only stories we get of people talking about healing are those who get miraculously healed, and you're not, or you're still praying, or you're still processing, it's not always terribly helpful.
Yeah.
It's actually really helpful to have those and the stories of people who are telling their story and saying, well, it hasn't happened yet, but I'm still trusting God.
Yeah, absolutely.
Or if it's not necessarily about physical healing, but so many other things where people are going through difficult situations and they're still on the journey. That is a testimony.
Yeah.
That God's still with us and he's still walking. And actually, when you think about it, when is it going to be done? When are we going to tell the story? Are we going to wait for someone else to tell the story because we've gone? That's a bit late.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think we should be telling stories more often and trusting that it's okay to tell a half-finished story.
Absolutely.
Because that's all we've got. I haven't yet got the next bit. All I've got is what God's done today. And that's good enough to share.
And I think that's where you allow people in to the journey with you.
Yeah.
Because we don't always have to have the answer.
And none of us are the finished product yet,
Nope.
are we? I hope.
No.
No, I'm still work in progress.
Yeah,
definitely.
me too.
And that doesn't give us free rein, but it does mean we're saying you can't wait to be perfected before you trusting that God's going to use you in some way.
I find it really interesting because I went through quite a season of reading a lot of biographies, and they always seem to have a happy ending.
That's my point, I think.
And it's like,
because
oh,
they only get written unless you're a modern celebrity, in which case you, by the age of 25, you're on your 4th autobiography. But for most people, those Christian ones get written at the end of someone's life. And they've always got this amazing story, and it's always got a happy ending, and it's the momentous impact they had. And I've read some of those and been really inspired, but you realise you're just in a different league.
Yeah.
And I think that's the other challenge about testimonies is we think ours aren't worth sharing
Yeah, come on.
because I'm not in the big league.
Mm-hmm.
And I've come across that myself. I felt that myself.
Yeah.
I don't have a gang lord to Christian testimony. I wasn't running the primary school gang or the nursery gang, you know. You almost feel like some people invent their story or dress it up a little bit. Not everybody does. People tell genuine stories, and some have come from a really bleak place. But I'm aware of the pressure of having a before and after story. And for many people, that isn't clear, particularly if you've grown up, you came to faith at a young age, or you grew up in a Christian home, or your story just doesn't feel that exciting. But yet it still is
absolutely.
a story of God's work in your life, and it's still amazing.
Yeah.
and is worth sharing.
Isn't it interesting? I think there's a lot of people that would say that.
Mm.
The pressure of having to have a testimony when you get to be baptized. So the normal tradition is that if you want to be baptized, is that you would actually share your testimony as how you've come to this place of wanting to be baptized. And it seems to be the stumbling block for a lot of people that they want to get baptized, but they don't want to stand at the front and they don't want to say a testimony. And some of that's because, well, what actually have I got to share? And you want to go, you.
Yeah, that's right.
That's what you got to share, you.
I think
and
sometimes
you are enough.
I think sometimes we think our story is boring because we've lived it our whole lives. We know
And
it inside out.
Yeah.
Why would that be interesting? But it is interesting.
Yeah.
From from the
Absolutely,
outside.
it really is, because we're nosy what's it, so we want to know what's going on in someone else's life, don't we?
Yeah.
And actually, other people's lives are really interesting.
Yeah, they are. And you want to celebrate the big stuff and the small stuff.
You do, yeah.
You know, reading all of the autobiographies, reading all of these mass healings, reading all of these things can so easily shine a light on feeling like your prayer life isn't effective. The formula that they did that encourage you to do isn't working for you, and they can bring up all of these things. So now if I ever give a book, there was a book just recently that I read because I wanted to know that it was true and real and helpful. I didn't want to hand this book over to a dear friend that I love and it give false hope and be super spiritual, unhelpful and not biblically sound. So I read it and I was really pleased to hand it over because it didn't have all the answers. It was just raw and real about their journey. And I thought, this is helpful because I am done with reading. Listen, I will celebrate everybody's testimony from the really bleakest of places to the everyday kind of life challenges that people are going through, because in the eyes of God it doesn't matter. There is no bigger or better. It is you're holding on to him, whatever. That's he loves a heart that is faithful to him. He loves a heart that is going to just keep calling out to him, whether it's for the big stuff or the small stuff. There is no grade of better. But in the real life, the nitty gritty for everyday people, we need to hear everybody's testimonies of the good, the bad, the ugly. We need to hear it because it's real. Whether it is that, you know, your car broke down and you needed to lay hands over it and you needed to pray, or someone just randomly rocked up you've never met before just at the right. We need to hear these things because God is in those things. They're amazing testimonies to show our God is alive and our God is at work. And we so need to hear that stuff.
Okay. So shall I tell a little testimony?
Go for it.
And it's a half-baked testimony. That's the terrible word to use. But it's not. I'm 50, so I'm not got to the end of my life yet. So it's a halfway through my life testimony. Just what you wanted, Stuart.
Great.
So it's funny how you mentioned the car breaking down, because it is a car breaking down story. You two know this story already. 2-3 weeks ago, our car broke, and it was terminal, very terminal. New engine required. So okay, ended up getting a new car. So I found a new car in Chatham. Drove in my van, my work vehicle, to collect the new car.
And you love your work van.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's a beauty. So what are you laughing at?
Sorry, just to interrupt your story. This is very rude, but whenever you talk about your work van, you almost always mention the latest mechanic who's clapped eyes on it, or the latest person who's clapped eyes on it has told you how amazing your van is.
They love it because it's simplicity.
Yeah.
My van is 20 years old. And it looks 20 years old.
That's why I'm laughing when you're saying it's beautiful. I'm thinking that's not what I think.
I'm actually looking at it and thinking I need to tidy it up, actually. But anyway, so we've gone to Chatham, and then we're coming back from Chatham. And so my daughter's driving the car, and I'm in the van.
That's brave in itself.
Yes, that's another story. And we are... how far is Southborough? We are 3 miles from home, and the van stops. It just conks out. And I coast into a parking space and go, and it won't start. And I'm like, oh dear. So I moved some of the valuables from the van into the new car, drive home. And the point of the testimony is I had a bad night's sleep, as I worried about my means of earning money.
Yeah.
It's not just a vehicle.
Mhm.
I cannot provide for my family without this beautiful 20-year-old van.
Mhm.
And I had a bad night's sleep. I woke up at 5 a.m. going, and the testimony of this is, even in the midst of that, I knew it'd be okay. But such a weird tension, because I felt it's all going to be fine. There was a trust in me about trusting God's faithfulness in my life. But at the same time, my flesh was like, I was.
Yeah.
It was a strange,
Yeah.
strange tension. And just to finish the story, I had a good idea what was wrong with the vehicle, and then I then drove the car to the van, fixed it, and then I had a working vehicle again. So it ended well.
Yeah.
But in the middle of that, I was like really stressing. But God was in it at the same time, if that makes sense.
Makes
And
total sense.
you get it, do you?
Yes. It's almost needing to tell. I think it is Joyce Myers that says sometimes you need to tell your soul to sit down and shut up. And I loved it when I listened to her say that, because sometimes you fight your flesh.
Yeah.
You know your spirit. Overwhelmingly, in your deepest place, you've got this thing that says it's going to be fine. But the rest of you is going mad. You can't sleep. You're sweating about it. You're overthinking it. And you just want to say, sit down and shut up, because God's got it. But there's that tension. So I totally get that.
Yeah.
It's that place of going, I'm not going to go here. I'm not going to chew this over in my mind. Enough, Lord. You've got this.
Yeah.
And you almost have to say it 50 million times in the day to kind of make it surrender and submit to what you know
and
is
on
true.
any other day, if someone was talking to you about that story, as in it was their story, not yours, you would be encouraging them when they come up with that little phrase that's the key to it all, which was, I can't provide for my family. You'd be reminding them who owns not just the cattle on 1,000 hills, but who owns the hills that the cattle are on, and who owns the valleys, and who owns everything. You'd be reminding them and encouraging them, say, who's really providing?
Yeah.
And yet, and that lovely tension you described is, I know it, but actually, it's still down to me. I've got to provide for them, but I know that God's going to provide. But I need to do it. But and that's the reality, isn't it, that you've described so
And
well.
to defend my 20-year-old van, if my 4-year-old van had broken down, would I be able to fix it? I very much doubt it.
This is now going to turn into an advert for your van.
Never. But on the subject of God providing and who owns the hills, I'm thinking about this lately. I own my house, but it's actually just a temporary thing,
Yeah.
because one day I'll die and someone else will own my house. And then that person will die and someone else will own the house. It's weird that it's my house, but it's just for now that it's my house. And that sort of brings in perspective how short your life is and who's in charge, really. It's not me.
Yeah.
It's him.
Absolutely.
And that's why sharing our story, I suppose, is really helpful, isn't it? And it's, I think it doesn't matter if it's someone who's got a lot or got nothing, or who's, I love hearing the stories of people who are brand new to faith and those who've been Christians for decades and decades and decades. And there's a different weightiness to the stories, but it doesn't matter. They're all encouraging, aren't they? As long as they're honestly saying, this is who I am, this is what God's done and is doing. And even to the point of, I don't know what God's doing. I think I love those stories too, where people aren't really sure. But yet, and that's sometimes the value of sharing your testimony, is because you're not even sure what it is that God's doing. But as you share it, sometimes you get more clarity.
Yes.
But actually friends and others listening can then help you understand what God's doing as you've shared your story, as they relate back to it again. And there's power in that too. I just wonder, there may be people listening who have heard Christians talk about the Christian faith and they don't yet share that story. That's not yet their story, and And I think all three of us, and Obi too, if he were here, would encourage everyone listening to recognise that God is involved in your life so far. He's been involved up to now, whether you clearly see him or aren't quite so sure. And for this next part of your journey, he can be involved even more. And you can just reach out to him and know that he's going to be there. He's watching, not just watching over you, but he wants to be with you and part of the rest of your story in a really tangible way.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. And ask him in.
Yeah.
Just acknowledge. I think that's how any of us have come into a place of relationship with God, knowing who Jesus is by just being in that place that started to ask the question and then started to pray. I had no idea what I was doing in praying, particularly. There was no formula. I didn't follow anything. Just remembering just praying, ridiculously praying about a birthday party and weather, which I've shared previously. And then seeing that answered prayer and just being a bit like, okay, who this person is that I'm talking to hears me. And you know what, testimony from the people that are around you that might be walking this journey of faith. Just listen a little bit more.
I've got a Bible verse that sort of fits really. It's the last.
You've got an amazing memory for Bible verses tonight, James.
This is quite a well-known Bible verse if you're a Christian, but maybe we're
I'm
talking
impressed.
to people that may not have a relationship with God yet. This is the last book of the Bible, Revelation, and this is Jesus speaking. He says, "Here I am. I stand at the door and knock." And when he says that, he's talking about the door of your heart, or the door of your life, if you like. "If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and I will eat with that person and they with me." So it's basically talking about a relationship. That's all Christianity is. It's a relationship with the living God. And it's just a matter of acknowledging, hey, there is a God and I want him to be part of my life. And it's a matter of just saying, starting that relationship by saying yes. And opening the door of your heart and saying, I want a piece of you, God, please. And journeying with him.
I love that. Thank you for sharing that. Can you just say what chapter in Revelation that was and verse again?
Yes,
so if
so
anyone
that's
wants to read it themselves, that they can go.
Last book of the Bible, Revelation 3, verse
20.
Thank you. Verse 20.
Well, I think as ever we could continue to talk about this, and what I think I love over the year that we've been doing this, we've all had little moments of sharing the testimony of what God is doing, what he has done, and I look forward to hearing more, because our God is always at work. Always. And no doubt there'll be a time when we will sit around this table and we'll share even more with you guys that are listening, some of the stuff that God's doing, and being real with you, the good, the stuff, the hard stuff. We want to share with you, because we are here to encourage each other and equip each other on this journey. None of us have got it made. We are all still learning, and it doesn't matter how long you've been walking with Jesus, there's still more to learn. There's still more to yield to. There's still more to be open to shift and change. And he's wonderful, and he's gracious and gentle at doing it. So if you are walking right now and you're in a tough space, get onto YouTube, go to TWCF, have a listen for the last 2 weeks that we have done with testimonies, and allow your spirit to be encouraged and excited. Go and speak to others and say, hey, what's God doing? Because when we speak like this, it does spur something in us to just continue to go. And listen, if you're going through a really tough time right now, go and speak to some people and tell them that you're going through some stuff, because you might be really shocked and surprised at the journey that they may well have walked or be walking, and they'll either partner with you or they'll just encourage you with how God has been faithful with them. So guys, thank you. Stuart, I really want to thank you for bringing this and going with a couple that came to you months ago to say, can we share your testimony? Because it has been rich, and I'm really excited about what this is going to be doing with our church family, getting to know one another.
Good. Yeah, and I'm thankful to them for coming with the idea in the first place. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Well, gents, as ever, it's been a lovely evening. And Obi, we look forward to having you around the table in a couple of weeks.
Mm.
Right, good night, gents.
Good night.
God bless.